very likely that the Hyundai Creta is right at the top of your shopping list if you're looking for a mid-sized SUV, especially since it's had a fairly significant midlife update. But how does it actually stand against something like the Skoda Kushaq with its focus on driver involvement and that slightly premium badge? Or can you get most of what the Creta offers but in a far more efficient package like this Toyota Urban Cruiser Hyryder with its hybrid powertrain? The Skoda Kushaq and Toyota Urban Cruiser Hyryder both do enough visually to give you that substantial SUV presence. Despite the considerable part sharing they come from, these two have also managed to retain the identity. But the Kushaq is the tallest and narrowest car here, which shows in its slightly top-heavy proportions. The Hyryder, on the other hand, is very similarly sized to the Creta, but could do with a shade more presence in this midst. The Hyryder goes the extra mile with its 210 mm of ground clearance. The Creta and Kushaq are closer to the norm at 190 and 188 mm. The Hyundai Creta in this facelifted form isn't perfect either. The heavily revised lighting and panels don't quite gel with the more rounded profile that's carried over. But the sharp H-pattern full-width lighting and oversized grille and contrasting panels give it a dollop more road presence than the other two. It also looks the largest of the lot here, which many will like. It's likely that you will do quite a few road trips with your family in these cars, and the Creta is your good friend in this regard. With its 433-litre boot space, it's right at the top of the segment, and as you can see, a family's weekend luggage fits very easily in this. It's got a completely flat loading lip. It's very easy to just put stuff in or just pull them out like this. Now the Kushaq has 385 litres, which seems significantly less than the Creta, and you do have to lift it up quite high considering it's a deep space here. But once inside, you realize in terms of actual usable space, there's actually not much difference, especially considering the wide opening that's there and just the shape of the boot. So with the Hyryder's hybrid powertrain, as you can see, there's some compromise to be made. The battery pack, or at least a big part of it, sits in the boot. So as you can see, I don't really have space to put in this bag here. Now what I can do, considering it's only 233 litres, is I can lift out this partition. You're going to have to figure out where to keep it and place my bag like this here. The Hyundai Creta and Skoda Kushaq Senior are both powered by 1.5-litre turbo-petrol engines and pair with 7-speed dual-clutch transmission. The Hyundai has a slight edge in performance at 160 PS against the Skoda's 150, and both make very similar torque. The Hyryder's 115 PS system output is misleading, as is the 0 to 100 kmph time of 11.2 seconds. In the real world, especially on crowded Indian roads where medium throttle inputs are the norm, it's not far behind the others here. Now, you know that Skoda and VW made their name with the performance and just the engagement that they offer, but with the Creta, it's very clear that Hyundai has more than caught up. Is generally quiet, and then you have the way the engine performs. To start with, it's very linear in its power delivery for a turbo petrol, so even from very low revs it pulls very clean. It has a wide power band, and past 3500 rpm it really does pick up steam quite significantly. There's a 1 second difference in the 0 to 100 time between the two cars. The Kushaq does it in about 9.7, this one does it in 8.7. But the main thing is that you don't realize that performance, and a big part of that is the gearbox. The Skoda seems to favor efficiency more than drivability. The Creta's more tractable nature means that a good dose of power is always accessible, and when you do need downshifts, the Hyundai is again more alert. Both give you an S gearbox mode that seems to bring more change to the Skoda, getting the gearbox much closer in alertness to the Hyundai. Now where does the Hyryder stand in the middle of all this? It's of course a very different experience. It's quite grumbly, there's a lot of vibration, so that's not very nice. But what these two cars can't match is that immediate electric power. So when you're crawling in traffic where both these cars are not at their strongest, especially the Kushaq, it can feel a bit jittery and unsure. It's constantly swapping between gears. This is a slightly better. In that sense, the CVT and the electric power in the Hyryder makes it really very simple and smooth in city stop-start driving. But you always have that electric torque at your disposal, which really does help when you just want to make up speed. This quite cohesive hybrid system also doesn't feel out of breath on the highway. The engine is more in focus, but you always sense that the electric motor is supplementing it. Now you get drive modes in the Hyryder and the Creta, and it's a bit more effective in the Creta given how the powertrain is. When you have the battery in a high enough state of charge, there's also an EV-only mode in the Hyryder that makes low-speed maneuvering simpler still. There's also brake gearbox mode that is meant to aid in engine braking. The Creta also gives you traction modes that alter ESC and throttle responsiveness.
Now the new Creta comes very close, but if you are looking for driver engagement, and that is quite high on a list of priorities, the Skoda is still the one that delivers the most. And then just generally, that substantial feeling that I keep talking about, that's as intact here as it is in the Creta and in the Hyryder. But somehow with that, the Kushaq just manages to feel a bit more agile, a bit more lit. It changes direction a bit more eagerly than the other two. And that really comes to effect, say, on a twisty set of road that you might encounter on a road trip, where you just feel a bit more confident. The body movements, they're a bit more precise. The car flows along the road a bit more confidently. And then again, in terms of high-speed stability, the Creta is again very close. Last degree of security, that last degree of sure-footedness means that you feel that bit more confident. So on a road trip, this is still the car to get for you.
At slow speeds, the Toyota feels pliant and comfortable, but you still do feel like you're being bounced around a touch too much over uneven road surfaces and potholes. The Creta is the most impressive in this regard. Hyundai has notably reworked the suspension with this update, and there's now a solid, substantial demeanor to the Creta that was always missing earlier. This pairs with some thoughtful suspension tuning that is comfortable in most road conditions. There's a soft edge to it that isn't disturbed over rough patches, which is more apparent in the Skoda with its European-like tuning. The Hyryder's soft suspension and light steering makes it a bit less sure around faster turns than the other. There's also more lean that you need to manage at these times.
Now what that also means is that as you go faster, the Hyryder can feel like the least tied down of all the three cars here. So you do notice a bit more vertical and sideways movement, and also a bit more pitching and diving. But if you don't like driving these cars quickly, whereas most of you won't, in that case the Hyryder does a pretty decent job.
The Kushaq and Creta are also quite close to each other in efficiency. The Hyundai's less stressed nature and eco mode do a similar job as the quite well integrated cylinder deactivation function in the Skoda. They also run quite calm at high speeds with the extra gears, so you see some impressive highway figures with both doing around 16 kmpm. But they don't get anywhere close to Toyota's hybrid system. Even in some very heavy traffic, the kind that electric motors don't like, we managed over 17 kmpm. Also impressive was the over 21 kmpl we managed on the highway.
Now the Creta's interior at first glance at least looks the most modern, unsurprisingly, and it also looks like it's of the highest quality. The perception of quality is really quite great considering you have all these light materials, this copper highlighting, this textured finish here, and just the way that it's laid out, especially with these seamless vents. But look closer and it's a bit disappointing considering that you don't really get soft materials anywhere. Aside from a few small patches here, everything is hard plastic, which is fine. I mean, the Kushaq is also similar, but what lets you down a bit is the finish. It's somewhat of a lower grade than what we've come to expect from Hyundai, and here in this company it really does stand out. Especially with the Kushaq, it has a very premium feeling cabin. Yes, it doesn't have any more soft surfaces than this, but just the textures along the dash, for example, the various indents on the dash, just the way the air vents work, the latches, the switchgear especially, considering a lot of this switchgear is shared with lesser Hyundais, that really does stand out in the Kushaq.
But you have to contend with fiddly touch panels in the Kushaq for the climate functions and in the Hyryder for the audio controls. Here the Hyundai's large tactile knobs and toggle switches are a great help. They are much less distracting to use on the move. But oddly, there are some other odd cost-cutting choices like the flimsy sunshades in the Creta and the sagging sunroof cover in the Hyryder, which the Kushaq manages to cover up a bit better.
But surprisingly, it's the Hyryder that gives you the most amount of soft materials. So you have soft padding right on the dashboard, a lot more around the doors and so on. And the brown upholstery in the Toyota also helps it stand out. But letting it down is the switchgear. Almost all of it is shared with lesser Maruti, Suzuki and Toyota products, and really that does show at this price point. For example, the stocks on that feel the weakest here. You have a lot of empty dummy buttons which really don't sit well at a car of this price.
All the SUVs here will give you various forms of digital drivers displays. The one in the Hyryder is the most informative. It's a 10.25-inch one in the Creta that feels especially modern and fluid. The one in the Skoda isn't quite as vibrant and is also not the easiest to use despite being the most customizable one. It's tough to choose between the touchscreens in the Creta and Kushaq. Both are thoughtfully laid out and smooth to use. The 10.25-inch one in the Creta is packed with kit-like onboard navigation and ambient sound, but still uses a wired connection for Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. The other two give you a wireless function that works smoothly, especially so in the Hyryder. Otherwise, the 9-inch screen in the Toyota is functional and not the most responsive or intuitive of the lot here, but you still get a system that feels contemporary.
Now at first you will find the Creta seats also to be quite comfortable. They're of a wide shape, so if you're of a wider frame they really help, and you have a good deal of underthigh support. All the three cars here give you ventilated seats, so that's not a problem. But spend more time in the Creta like we are doing right now, and you do realize that the flat contouring really does get to you, and if you have a slightly bad back like I do, then your long trips do get a bit painful. In that regard, both the other cars, even though the cabin itself is a bit narrow and you sit a bit closer to your passenger, they cocoon you a bit more, the seats, they hug you a bit more, especially the Kushaq. It's really quite comfortable. You can spend a full day driving it and not feel all that tired. And the Hyryder has some really soft cushioning, so it finds a nice middle ground between the two.
You have large door pockets in all three cars in both rows, the one in the Kushaq especially so. The Creta also does well with the way it carves out space in the center console, while the Kushaq will give you Type-C charge ports for all the passengers. You get just the one in the Creta and none in the front of the Hyryder, although all three get wireless charging. The Kushaq is the only car here with a 5-star NCAP rating. The Creta also happens to be the only one with ADAS. Now this is one of the better such systems out there for our conditions and does help with you staying alert in regular driving. The Hyryder also gets a 360-degree camera setup like the Hyundai, but is let down by a grainy feed that limits effectiveness. This is starkly different from the crisp high-res displays in the Creta, which also adds the blind view function. The Kushaq doesn't get rear disc brakes, but its stable chassis means it takes the least distance to stop. The Toyota with its regen system and heavy hybrid gubbins takes the longest.
Now the Kushaq has the longest wheelbase here, 2651 mm, and that really does show in terms of the kind of legroom that you have here. As you can see, this seat is placed quite high, so I have a lot of space just to roll my feet around. And with the way the roof is scooped out, you also have a good deal of headroom, especially since you don't get a panoramic sunroof unlike the other two cars here. In that sense, it's great. And also great is the seat comfort. So as you would expect in a Skoda, you are cocooned very well. So you are sat in place, you're held in place even on a long road trip. You don't tire easily. So that's a big positive. Having said that, the narrow width of the cabin really does come into play. So while you don't have a very high central hump, 3 abreast here will be a bit of a squeeze. You'll have to place your feet in like this. So yeah, that will be a problem, especially when you see what the Creta offers. Now the Creta, its lighter upholstery by itself gives you a greater sense of space, but that's only enhanced with the kind of amenities that you have inside. You have a full panoramic sunroof that again adds to the sense of lightness. You get sunshades in the Creta, and even the seat back reclines, and it reclines to a really quite comfortable angle. And the seat itself is much wider, so while the seat cushioning itself isn't as comfortable as in the Kushaq, so you can seat 3 abreast easier in the Creta. But yeah, you don't get a center headrest, which this and the Hyryder both give you.
All the cars here come reasonably well equipped, and here's a quick look at what you get and don't get with all the 3 cars here.
Now with the Hyryder, again there's some compromise to be made with the hybrid packaging. To start with, the nice things, you still have a decent amount of legroom, even though this has the shortest wheelbase of the lot here, 2600 mm. You have a decent amount of legroom, especially footroom. You can tuck your feet in, the seats are quite high, and you also sit quite high up. So even though the windows and the sunroof feel a bit smaller, a bit closer to you, and generally the dark cabin feels a bit tighter than the other 2 cars here, you do have some sense of space. Yeah, the headroom could have been better. I'm not very tall and I'm already pretty close to the roof, so that could have been better. Another good thing about the Hyryder is the seat cushioning. It's softer than what you have in the Creta, very close to the Kushaq, although not as good. But yeah, so long distances will be comfortable. But yeah, for more than 4 people, it's going to be a bit difficult, considering this space here is quite tight with the central hump, and again with the seats being pushed forward as they are.
The Toyota Hyryder starts to make an immense amount of sense when you see that at Rs 23.92 lakhs on-road Mumbai, it actually doesn't charge a premium for the hybrid system. So if efficiency and easy city driving are your highest priorities, look no further. The turbo-petrols can't match the frugality but feel like more complete packages. The Kushaq at Rs 23.28 lakh does a bit better with its cabin ambience and impressive driving character, but the Creta for a slight premium more gives you so much. It's faster, almost as engaging to drive, and packs heat, more equipment and practicality.